Okay, so in this video, we are going to see the start of what's called the new imperialism. Right? The old imperialism was when the Europeans were content, happy with having a few trading posts and small pieces of territory in Southeast Asia and Africa. The new imperialism, they want to conquer entire countries now. And there are various reasons for this. One is the Second Industrial Revolution, which is always demanding more raw goods to feed its factories, and it's always producing new finished goods that it needs to sell in new markets. So Europe and America's solution to that problem was to conquer and take the natural resources and then sell the finished goods to their conquered territory. There's also growing rivalries in Europe, almost a competition over who can have the biggest empire and make the most money off their empire. Then there was social Darwinism and racism. Now, social Darwinism is applying survival of the fittest to human society. And many thought that Europeans and their descendants, white Americans, was the best race, the most fit race, the most intelligent race. Therefore, it was okay for them to conquer because they were on top of the food chain, so to speak, which of course is a very racist concept. And then there was something called white man's burden, which was also racist, but it said that the white race, since it was the best race, supposedly, that it had the moral obligation, the responsibility, the duty to spread its civilization and its culture and its education all around the world, even if the world didn't ask for it, because the world was too basically dumb to know that it needed the white man's help. So we were going to have to force ourselves upon those other civilizations and force them to modernize, which is a very racist concept. But as this political cartoon shows, we, Europeans and white America, we became the burden. You can see Uncle Sam out front. Behind him is Britain. Behind him is Germany. Behind him is France. We become a huge burden on the people that we conquer, both from an economic standpoint and from a cultural standpoint. So you look at what was going on in Southeast Asia. The Europeans had been in Southeast Asia since the late 1400s because of the spice trade. You get to the 1800s, though, the late 1800s, right? And for the first time, Southeast Asia is being conquered by the Europeans. They're going after those mainland Southeast states now. So you look at Great Britain, it conquers Singapore, right on the tip of the Malay Peninsula, so they could use it as a port, a harbor for British ships to enter into and restock and refuel as like a base of operations for trading in Southeast Asia. Then they take over the country of Burma, modern day Myanmar. And remember, there are rivalries during this time period, and Britain's great colonial rival at first was France. So France begins to take over Southeast Asia because Britain has taken over Southeast Asia. And France conquers Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam and lumps it all together and calls it Indochina, which is actually another sign of European racism, lumping Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam all together like they're all the same, which is not true. Each has its own language, its own history, and its own culture, but many Europeans and white Americans viewed Southeast Asia as all the same, right? Which, of course, is a racist mentality. Now, the only part of Southeast Asia never to be conquered is the country of Thailand. So it's the only country in Southeast Asia never to be conquered. One reason is it's just blessed with a series of great monarchs during this very trying time for Thailand. These monarchs are very well educated and familiar and become familiar with European politics and customs. So that helps. Another benefit is Thailand's location. There's British Burma there. There's French Indochina, and Thailand is in the middle. Basically, Britain and France agree with each other that neither will ever conquer Thailand, so Thailand can act as a buffer between their territories. So Thailand can keep them separated, which of course benefits Thailand. Now, America, we get involved in Southeast Asia as well. There's a chain of islands in Southeast Asia called the Philippines, and it was part of the Spanish Empire. But in the 1890s, the Philippines begins to rebel against the Spanish Empire, led by this man, Emilio Aguinaldo. So the Philippines are rebelling against Spain. They want their independence. They want to be their own country. As the Philippines is rebelling against Spain, Cuba, right off the coast of Florida, is also rebelling against Spain in the 1890s. And America had business interests in Cuba. There were plantations owned by Americans, for instance, in Cuba. So when Cuba rebelled against Spain, America sent one of its naval ships to Cuba, to Havana. It's called the USS Maine, to protect U.S. interests in Cuba. Plus, American opinion was firmly against Spain. As Cuba and the Philippines rebelled, we particularly supported the Philippines in the rebellion against Spain. Public opinion was against the Spanish, due in large part to newspaper articles published in America writing about the Spanish atrocities that they were committing in the Philippines. Well, that naval ship, while in harbor in Cuba, it exploded. Now, more than likely, it was an accident on board that caused the explosion, but that's not how the American viewed it at the time. The American public viewed it as an attack by the Spanish, right? So America then declares war on Spain. It's called the Spanish-American War. Now, Spain was a shadow of its former self at this point, but from an American perspective, it was a chance to show the world that we mattered. And so we are now fighting against the Spanish in Cuba and in the Philippines, and we promise to help the Philippines gain their independence from Spain. We defeat Spain, and by defeating Spain, America gains Cuba. We take over Cuba. We gain, or we turn it to a protectorate. We take Guam. We take Puerto Rico, and we actually buy the Philippines, right? We buy the Philippines, so we do not help the Philippines gain their independence like we said we would. We actually buy them and make them part of the American empire. And when this happens, the Filipino people begin to fight against us, right? And so we spend the next 3 years fighting the Filipino people, crushing their rebellion against us, right? And we justified this by white man's burden. That is our president at the time, President McKinley, and supposedly that is him showing the light of civilization to the Philippines, and we're saying we're going to bring them freedom and education and justice and commerce to the Philippines. And of course, that's very racist, and that's the white man's burden. They already had their own civilization, they already had their own culture, right? And of course, we could educate them and trade with them without conquering them. So this was a very racist idea. Really, we wanted the Philippines because that gave us a base of operations in Southeast Asia, and we thought it would be a stepping stone to trading with China.